Yes, everybody wants to ask. We'll go left to right.
What does Socrates make of the trolley problem?
Of which problem?
So you have the trolley that's going to hit some guy on the track, and you can move the switch, and
He was addressing simple. Yes, the question is what Socrates would make of the problem if whether you could take an action where an innocent person will die while you're saving another innocent person. Well, you see, Socrates didn't discuss it for one very simple reason. It's sort of an artificial problem. Most people who get killed are not killed for that reason, right? So I'm sure that the problem needs to be discussed. I'm even sure somehow that there's a place in this course where we'll discuss it. But again, since you're not asking my opinion, you're asking Socrates' opinion, I am not familiar of any place where he discusses this complicated situation. He's talking about very simple situation. Could you kill an innocent person directly so that some good for your state will arise, or good for you will arise? Right? And that he sees as a very unambiguous problem. Observe that we still do not. It's not, his position is still not accepted. I'm not saying by our politicians, by any politicians. The argument that might is right, you probably heard. If not, read the op page of New York Times, right, about whether we should do this or that. And of course we should, because we are saving American lives. There are people in this room who talk to me and explain some evil things done by some government in some country by saying, but, think they're saving some lives. Yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. The argument is still not solved, and Socrates is still in a tiny minority. Especially, think about it, in his case, these were not just words. He was prepared to stand for this rather unpopular view. Okay, we'll go.
I was confused about your statement that Socrates was not superstitious when he hears prophetic voices and believes in the afterlife and judgment. Who's doing the judgment?
In this God is doing the judgment. You see, some people, you might think that person who believes in God is a superstitious person. It is a point of view. For example, you might think that I do believe in God, superstitious person. I don't think so. I think all of my opinions are well reasoned, whether you agree with them or not. So Socrates clearly was one of the most rational person there was. If your idea of superstition means that anybody who acknowledges the existence of immaterial things is superstitious, you're actually going to get into deep trouble fairly soon, especially if you start reading Plato. Because as Plato shows, there are very many immaterial things which you have to believe, such as, say, numbers. Do they really exist? Could you point me to a number 3? Right? So it's not as simple. Yes, it is a popular point of view which I encounter daily. We live in fundamentally atheistic society, and people assume that believers are superstitious. Well, at least Socrates didn't think so. He reasoned, but he did not. Again, most people nowadays take it for granted, but it wasn't historically. Like Euler didn't agree with you. Newton did not agree with you. Cauchy did not agree with you. Descartes did not agree with you. Do I have to go through all the list? You will be surprised how few people did agree with you. It's a tiny, tiny minority. Of course, you say, what about, these modern atheists? Well, maybe they're great minds, maybe not. Let's wait a couple of thousand years, we'll find out. Yes.
So, by his refusal to flee, Socrates allowed somebody else, namely the people of Athens, commit more heinous crime, which is taking the innocent life. So how did he reconcile this?
The laws.
Repeat the question.
How did he...
It's the judicial procedure, right?
The question is, how did he reconcile the fact that, unjust punishment was carried with refusing to escape? His argument, which again, I cannot fully give, it occupies about 30 pages in this book. So you're welcome to read it, but his argument is fundamentally that the moment you accept the system is good, you say the laws are good, the constitution is good, this country protects me, you are bound. I know that it's not a popular point of view. The popular point of view, I have to respect my country as long as it's profitable. He says, no, I have to honor and obey the practical decision of legitimate authority, no matter what. It's not pick and choose, because society cannot function if we pick and choose. If the government, that's what he says. Right? Whether you agree, very many people I hear left and right who says, well, this is a bad country, I'll go to. I hate this country, I go to that country. Right? He didn't believe that. He said, my country, I have to obey the laws. And it's not just because this country makes me rich, or this country where I could make a good career. It's just the fact that I'm here, that I grew up. He did not believe that we grew up on our own as like somebody in Hard Times by Dickens, that I grew up in a gutter, he says. Well, he didn't believe we grew up in a gutter.
What if your country orders you to do evil?
To kill an innocent child.
What do you do if your country orders you to kill an innocent child? Very clear. You say no, and you die. That's what he says. It's very simple. You cannot do evil under any circumstances, no exceptions. Not even if it's very profitable. Not even all of your relatives will make money out of it. You cannot do it.
So I want to come back to the statement that he was in minority and nobody really accepted his point of view, nor there nor later.
It's not what I said. I never said that.
So, hence my question, how is he a major influence on our civilization if what we do, or what is the general accepted practice, is to do something else than what he said?
Yes, the question is a very good question. So how come he is a major influence in spite of the fact that we keep doing evil? I think it's a fair summary. So yes, we do evil, but you see, our civilization is precisely, and this is why I claim it's a great civilization, that it has people like Socrates, that they're not forgotten, that for about 2,500 years, since the year of 399, that's the date to remember, that's when they killed him, 399 BC, all kind of, I will use the word, good people would stand with Socrates. Are they us? Usually not. But they're good people. Good people are people who are prepared to die for what is right. Are in the minority. Would you believe me if I said that they're in a majority? I mean, the historical evidence of, I don't want to go back to Germany or to Soviet Union or to United States during American-Filipino War. Do I have to go through the list of atrocious things which humankind did over the last 2,500 years? Yes.
So how can Socrates justify any kind of war? So not in all wars you kill small babies, right? In some wars you just kill your opponent, which is like very similar.
How do you justify war? I mean, very clearly, and this is without any doubt, he was not a pacifist. He was a great soldier. That's what we know. And in his defense speech, he actually said, well, I mean, I wasn't afraid to stand at the first line, so, but he was not fighting babies.
I understand, but he was not fighting evil as well, because his opponents were...
No, he was not. He was no, and that is something you have to be very careful about. When you fight a war, when you fight other soldiers on proper terms, eventually we will talk about the notion of a just war. You do an honorable thing. You do a great thing. I thought that the last lecture I talked about this specific thing. Do I think that soldiers dishonorable? No, nothing of the kind.
Okay. A soldier you killed had 2 children. They die of starvation because the provider is killed. What then?
The question is, what happens if you kill a soldier and he has children? When you kill a soldier, you kill someone who sort of defends himself against you. There is a conflict between states. And you have to believe, and I highly recommend that you do, that unless you have very overwhelming evidence, assume that your government is right.
You said that war was started not by the majority of the people, but the minority that ruled, and they did it because they wanted to expand their businesses. So the core, the essence of war is making more money for the government, and not to make life better for everyone else.
The core of wars is for government to make rich people richer. Yes. And for example, I mean, it's very clear that Alcibiades gave a speech, it's in Thucydides, where he fundamentally says that, well, we have to expand, because you either expand or you're sort of dead. We have to go and take Sicily, and then we'll have to take Carthage, and then we have to take Italy, and then we'll go back and take Peloponnesus. I mean, he describes this, you have to build an empire. Yeah, that's a true thing. As an Athenian, unless you're look, the moment you become a part of society, when you are born, effectively, you have to obey the laws. This is a very tough thing. Not some absolute laws. If they order you to do something, which happens, which is clearly wrong, kill babies, and they do, you should be prepared to die. If they order you to go and fight other soldiers, you have to go fight. I mean, you don't like tough. No, I'm telling, by the way, let's have to distinguish. I'm telling you right now, Socrates' position. Later on, we'll get to positions much more extreme than that. But this is, from Socrates' point of view, you have to be a good citizen by obeying the laws. You cannot, as he repeats very clearly at the end of his speech, he says, nevertheless, I have to obey God more than you. Because if you offer to me freedom, this is to people who they think control his life. He says that if you offer me freedom, but ask me to promise never to discuss philosophy, I'm not going to take it, because I'm going to listen to God more than to you. Again, sorry, he was superstitious that way. So, and they killed him. But he was very clear that no, he will not listen to the laws. If they go beyond certain boundaries, he would die.
So the rule is basically, if you are willing to die for any cause, that's the just thing to do?
No. The just thing is not to die for any cause. The just thing is not, that we live in the society, especially now, where being sincere is valued. Socrates didn't give a fig about That's what they did say, actually, Greeks. So for being sincere in what you believed in, you have to believe in the right thing. You have to make an enormous effort to ascertain what is right. And only when you are totally convinced. Again, the normal rule is that you have to assume the management is correct. Sorry, I'm replacing government with management. But I actually do mean it. Like, say, Param is my boss. He's not. And he's probably quite grateful for that. But, but he tells me to do something. O'Brien, he's my real boss, tells me to do something. Unless I'm certain which is evil, which almost never the case, let me tell you. Like in my life it never happened. No boss ever ordered me to do something which was morally wrong. Bosses often ordered me to do things which were unbelievably inept, and I had to do them. Because I cannot refuse because something is inept. If it's evil, yes. Then I have to be prepared to walk out of the door. But it doesn't happen that often. We're not called to make this heroic stance daily. And if people who do in the society, there are all these people who sort of make all kind of causes, say, this woman wears furs, so I'll go and you don't wear furs, but let other people, obey the laws. Laws are good. Do not violate the speed limit. That's what I'm trying. No, not at all, Socrates says. You have to obey the laws. The laws are sacred. This is not a popular, yes?
One question I have is,
sure.
Did Socrates address, he mentioned that as you gain protection from the state or from the city, you enter a social contract. Did he address the fact that these contracts are entered not probably by will, but by birth? And did he address the fact that if someone, let's say a child who grows up and gains intelligence and knowledge and wisdom to judge that he does not feel he agrees with the state, he feels strongly against the principle of the state, did he ever address that exit clause?
No. The question was, did Socrates address the issue of what do you do if you disagree with your state, want to go to another state? No, he didn't, except in the following sense. Again, the situation of changing states was not common in his world, right? Only very rich and relatively evil people could do it, right? For a simple guy going to say, well, I don't want to live in Athens, I'm going to move to Sparta. No, it was not so. Again, Socrates, and I'll get to it in a second. Socrates addressed, or at least what is reported of Socrates in Plato's dialogue, are fundamentally important, whatever Plato thought were important problems. This was not an important problem, but in general, if I could say, they knew about people changing states, they realized that it does happen, but the normal situation, while you are here, before you made this dramatic decision of abandoning your state, you have to obey the state. That's what. Okay, he was first.
I think that was kind of the norm at that time. So I think Socrates is not new from this point of view. For like at least 100 years, that was the norm. As you say, only very evil people went to Persia, right, after they fought for Athens. But in general, that did not happen, right? And the laws were the laws. They were invested in their society in a way which I think we now are not.
I'm repeating. We need to give him a microphone. Yes, I agree with you what Mikna said, that they were much more invested or vested in their society.
They considered it their society. I mean, they were.
Yes, yes. Everybody. This was not, they were not consumers of society. They were not shopping for a good place. And, I'm going to do an impossible thing. If Socrates moved here, he would say, and we should not shop for a society. Yes, occasionally there are dramatic situations. Look, I would claim maybe there is justifications for that since I betrayed my country. Well, they kicked me out, so I have some excuse, but it was difficult. For several years, for 5 years, I waited to apply for American citizenship because I was not sure of whether, in case this was still during the Cold War, if there is a war, whether I could defend the United States against Russia. I take my obligation, even till today, I take my obligation to Russia, the place of my birth, is much more seriously than most people from Russia who say, oh, well, we got out of there and let them burn. You cannot abandon your mother, even if you move to live with your stepmother. United States is my stepmother, a very generous and good stepmother, but it's still my stepmother. You cannot break, this is an important relation. It's like, even if you run away from your mother because she abuses you, she's still your mother. The bond is there. Yes?
I think my question will make it even more complicated. So I'm following up on Envo's question. So you're saying that the case of moving is not a very sort of frequent or important case. It's not addressed, but there is a sub-case of that is important, is when they ostracize very important people, like Alcibiades, for example, and the action or...
In his case, no, they never ostracized him. Aristides, yes.
But the people who move to a state that ends up later in a state of war, what actions...
Okay, it's very clear. It's very clear. So the question is, what do you do if you are forced to go to another state and then the war is declared? Again, this is the question which for me was a very practical. 5 years, I was not applying for an American citizenship because I was concerned about this very simple case. Right? At some point, I decided that, okay, I am prepared to defend United States against all the enemies, foreign and domestic, with a gun in my hands, even if Soviet Union attacked. But it was not an easy decision. What could I tell you? What Socrates would say, I think he would say that it's a tough decision, very tough. Don't make it light. It's a very difficult decision. I'm not saying, I'm not just sharing my experience, saying, look, it was hard for me. What I'm saying that there is a bond. We have to view, this, using Edmund Wilson words, patriotic gore is important gore. This is not something we should just ignore and say, oh, this is propaganda. No, we are born in a place. These people, yes?
Well, this is kind of changing topic.
Good.
I wanted to come back to monotheism and
yes.
this notion. That a lot of these things seem very different than, Zeus and Hera kind of. Zeus didn't judge people after they died in Greek mythology. So what?
Yes. So the question. Okay, finished.
So the question is this seems kind of new, and the question is this new? How is it received? It seems like his.
How these monotheistic ideas of Socrates and Plato, which are clearly there, undeniably, were received. Well, eventually they were received. We know that, and we will encounter, for example, when St. Justin the Martyr, the first Greek philosopher who converts to Christianity in the middle of the 2nd century, when he writes in his apology about Socrates, he basically says he's one of ours. Yes, of course. Yes.
So I don't quite understand. So you say basically that this idea, Socrates' idea of posthumous judgment is like the new idea for Western civilization, whereas the ancient Egyptians clearly had it, and the Greeks were quite aware of this.
What about ancient Egyptians' view of afterlife? They have no ethical ramification at all. The notion of what you do, not how your body is preserved and what put in your thing, was not central. You could change your afterlife by a process of making your mummy very good, putting stuff there. We know that. How do
Wasn't there some weighting of your good deeds and bad deeds? I kind of vaguely remember.
It's very vaguely, because it was very clear if they belonged, do you remember there's 3 kinds of atheists? They were third kind. As most people, they believed that if you, at the end, you do some things, especially if you do it to your body, and later on we'll discover, for example, these ideas re-emerge in Christianity, they re-emerge in Judaism, they re-emerge in any society. The idea that you could buy yourself out of ethical things is common. It's a very attractive idea, because who knows, maybe there is some God there, but I know there is a way out. And Socrates basically was the first person, first person who said, no, there is no way out. You will be judged according to your deeds.
Who's judging you?
Or in his case, there is a tribunal of sons of Zeus. God is judging you, yes, effectively. God. There is an amazing, there is this amazing thing that when Socrates and Plato talk, and Aristotle later on, they don't talk about gods. It's God. The idea of monotheistic view, and it's a complicated thing. How do you deal with gods? What are gods? And Socrates was never challenging the existing religion, because he was saying, well, it's whatever people do as long as it leads to good. He even says his last words are, please offer the rooster to Aesculapius, the god. I'm going to be healed. Right? So, yes.
So when you are talking about killings and children and all, and this is not directly related to Socrates, but I could relate a story in Mahabharata. When Duryodhana was born, a lot of people recommended to kill him to save the society and civilization to avoid war. Do you believe sometimes it's justifiable to do some things believing in future?
Yes, there is an example in Mahabharata of the similar thinking. It's wrong to kill a baby, even if it's known he's going to become the most evil person and cause enormous harm. Yes, I'm not, again, you have to remember, I'm concentrating on Western civilization, and also I'm not quite sure when Mahabharata was written, which is another discussion. We're done. We solved all the problems of good and bad. Okay, see you in a week.